Good evening and welcome to Sim Racing Online. You join us here for the championship decider of the Group 5 DRM 1780s Champ. I knew it would be a mouthful, but here we are. It is the final round of 5. We have been to a multitude of places, but this is the championship decider. 2 drivers in the hunt for the championship honours. So let's have a look at where we've been so far. So if we look at our schedule, we have been to 4 other tracks. Our drivers have had to battle thinking about what cars they need to take, because drivers do need to take a different car for each round. So we started off at Norris Ring back in January, and then we went to the 90s version of Hockenheim, and then the 60s version of Zandvoort in the Netherlands, and then the early 2000s version of Nürburgring GP circuit, and now we are at Zolder in 1979, so a track used between 1975 and 1985. This is the layout we will be using, and it's very quick and very undulating and very, very bumpy. So let's see where we are in terms of the championship at the moment. So season standings as follows. So it looks like Tony Talviti is out front with 4 rounds done. He has missed a round, so he may have had a bigger lead than he has at the moment. So 72 points. He can be caught, with Nick Westy just behind with 56. But that is a very significant margin, and I will go through the points in a second. But Julian Pors is in 3rd with 49 points, and then we have Romain Lebreau in 4th, and then 5th is Lars Hagman on 37. So there could be a shuffle around in the top 5 in the championship, but as I said, the championship is not over. There is 25 points for the win, and we do have I believe it's 20 points for 2nd and 16 points for 3rd. Then it's 13, 11, 10, 9, 8, etc. all the way down to 1 point. So drivers do have a bonus point as well, but they do need to be in 15th place to get 1 single point, and they only need to start the race to be able to score some points. So pole position points may be very important tonight. It may decide positions. It may even decide the championship. So there we go. So in terms of the cars we're running tonight, so as I say, we are running the Group 5 DRM 1970s to 1980s, and we have a multitude of cars, and 5 cars all varied in look, varied in power. So we start off with the BMW E21, then we have the BMW M1, very powerful, apparently up to 1,000 horsepower. Then we have the Ford Capri Zaxpeed, the Lancia M2, and Porsche 935. So as I said, drivers had to take a different car for each round, and it's just so happened that this round has meant that we have a field full of Lancia M2s, so that people left this car to last. Maybe it's best suited to this track, maybe not, but that's where we are right now. So drivers are out on track at the moment doing their practice laps, so how about we join them and see what's going on. So I am utilising the automatic cameras feature, so the game is going to take control of what we see and what we hear. It helps me with covering the action, because it's not always easy to see what's going on at different parts of the track. So I have my track map. I can possibly see and switch to things that happen, but the game is going to control what we see in general. So let's check out what's happening with a few drivers on track. So we have a field of 11 at the moment. We are due to have about 15, maybe more. But this has been a popular championship. The Group 5 DRM cars seem to have been a popular choice, and popular between the drivers as well. So it's very, very fun. So at the moment, out on top, we have Lars Hagman, one of our drivers that missed one of the rounds, which means he had the choice of two cars for the last 2 rounds, or the last round rather. So he didn't have to take the Lancia, so he's taken the Ford Capri. Very nice sounding car. So as he enters turn 1, we've got to watch out for pit lane, because drivers, as I say, they do have a mandatory pit stop in this race. So it doesn't matter when they take the pit stop, but they have to do a pit stop and take tyres. So you see, bumping over the bumps for what is turn 2, coming into turn 3. But players have got to watch out for, drivers got to watch out for the bumps and also the curbs. The curbs can be lethal on this track, so drivers have got to watch out for that. As we come over the crest of the hill, down into the unfortunately ill-fated section. This is unfortunately where Gilles Villeneuve came to grief in 1982, as he vaulted over Jochen Mass's Arrow's car and unfortunately lost his life. So this circuit is infamous in a couple of ways. That it was unfortunate in the early 1980s that it had crashes which involved in injuries and fatalities. But this track was around in the early 80s for Formula 1. It ran up until 1985, I believe. No, 1984. So looking at down the list, so it ran from 1973. It missed a round in 1974, which I believe they went to a circuit called Nivelles, I believe, and then it ran from 1975 to 1982. This version of the circuit does have a bit of a vicious pit exit. Then after the death of Gilles Villeneuve in 1982, they went back to Spa-Francorchamps, and then they came back for the final time they visited Zolder, which is 1984. So this is not the modern layout. There's a couple of chicanes being added to this circuit. So it's a little different, but most of the back of the circuit is particularly the same. Some of the chicanes have been changed or tightened, but drivers won't be popping over the curbs like they would do in Formula 1 nowadays. The curbs are very angular. And if they end up jumping over the curbs, it would mean that they would possibly spin or ground out their cars on the centre of the curb, because it's a bit pointy. But 12 drivers currently doing battle in practice at the moment. So we're seeing on the top of the timesheets, it's Lars Hagman in the Capri with a 1:27.9. So that's a fast lap time. We can see from the Capri runner. So looking down the list, another one of our drivers in a Capri is Bjorn Hagman. That's Lars Hagman's brother. So a nice fetching yellow Capri. We've had to dull the colours a little bit on this track because they were a little bright. So apologies if the colours look a little bit washed out and a bit less contrast. But we had to dial it down a little because it was a bit bleached. But this is what we have so far. Another driver that's not in a Lancia is Joe Reebok. So Joe Reebok in the white and green Capri. And also another driver not in a Lancer is Philip Pichler, taking a very interesting hairpin. So that is the slowest corner on the track, down into the bottom section of the circuit. So this is an FIA Grade 2 track, so not really suitable for Formula 1 nowadays, but back then in 1975 to 85 it was a 15-turn 4.26 and 2.6 mile, so 4.26 kilometre and 2.64 miles of circuit, 15 turns. Back in the day, the The lap record for this circuit layout was made by René Arnoux in the Ferrari 126C4, which was actually in 1984, the last time they ran at this circuit with Formula 1, which was actually won by Michele Alboreto in the Ferrari. So the race lap record 119.294, so we're getting close, but it would have to go some to beat the Formula 1 lap record. So going through that awful chicane, bumping all the way. Players and drivers, I don't know why I can't keep calling them players, but drivers will have to be very careful with how much curb they take through the chicane. How brave do you want to be? Because it may end up taking off front diffusers and end up meaning that they are heading to the Armco very, very quickly. So let's see who else we got on track. So we do have our championship leader, Tony Talviti. He is one of the runners that has decided to take the Lancia this time out. He's only been here for 3 of the 4 rounds, so he did have the opportunity. If I look at my cheat sheet, I did have everyone's car choice on the list. So if we look down at Tony, so Tony Talviti, he did have the opportunity to take the BMW M1, which is it's a fast car, but sometimes a little bit cumbersome in some of the tighter corners. So maybe he decided the Lancer M2 is a bit nimbler, if that's a word, a bit easier to turn. So looking down our list on the championship table, let's see who else we've got. So I'm not seeing... Oh, there he is. So Julian Paws, currently in the pits at the moment. He is our 3rd place runner. So he may, if dramatic things happened, could he take the championship today? We have had some dramatic rounds this season with drivers being out front and unfortunately succumbing to a little bit of an accident and heading towards the barriers and not being able to continue. So will that be a problem this time around? So looking at the championship points, if I could do the maths in my head, so with Tony Talviti with 72 points, let's look back at the table so I can get a good idea of how many points behind. So Nick Westy is only 16 points behind. So if Nick Westy wins the race, so if I put this in my provisional so I can see, it helps me work out the points significantly. So if Nick Westy wins the race, he will be on 81 points, and Tony Talviti will not have to finish very far up the field, but he's got to be careful with where he finishes. So let's see. So he finishes first. It looks like if Tony Talviti finishes in 6th, so he has to finish in 6th or better if Nick Westy wins. If Nick Westy gets the pole position, then that's an extra point. That means they will be level at the end of this championship, but it means that Tony Talviti will possibly win on countback because he's got 2 wins and Nick Westy will only have 1. So that's the way the championship stands. As far as Julian Paws is concerned, if Julian Paws wins, then it looks like Nick Westy will have to finish in, let's see, 4th, 3rd. So if Julian Paws finishes in the lead, Nick Westy will have to finish in 2nd to take the championship, and that does depend on where Tony Talviti finishes as well. So it's all to play for. So drivers are out for qualifying. They have only about just under 10 minutes to set a qualifying lap. It does look like Nick Westy is the first out on the track at the moment, getting some clear air. And Lars Hagman not far behind in that Capri. So the Lancer is not as noisy as some of the other cars. It seems to float along the track as quieter than the others. You can hear that turbo spooling in the background, but you can see a big under tray underneath the car. So Lars Hagman has got a target to follow as we come through the final chicane. And we're going to come across the stripe to start the first lap of the day. So 12 drivers are going to battle it out for this championship. So you see that nasty pit exit there. So that outside tyre screaming away. Trying to get it slowed down for turn 2. Trying to avoid that curb on the inside. Same with this curb up here. It's a little bit of a late apex coming out there, and there's not any rumble strip to help you on the outside. Come through turn 4. And then all the way up here towards the chicane. Looks like there is a driver in front. The tail end of the late pit exit cars through the chicane. Turned very, very well. Wasn't bumping over any of those chicanes. And then we come over the hill, over the crest, towards down to this right-hander. Again, giving those curves a very wide berth. But will these tyres survive for 45 minutes of racing? And then down to the slowest corner on the track. The slowest corner is what I would maybe call a hairpin. It's not quite a hairpin, but it's very, very sharp. And then we're coming up a quick left-right. And then the final corner, again, is quite fast, depending on bravery. But you don't want to hit those curbs, otherwise you're possibly heading to the scenery. Slight clip of the curb on the inside on the second part of that chicane. But across the line for the first time lap, which is a 127.8. Which is quickly beaten by Lars Hagman with a 127.4. So Lars Hagman goes top. Currently, Tony Talviti, current championship leader. What kind of lap time can he put in? So he's put 36.5 in the first section of this lap, in the first sector of this lap. So it's not really setting the timesheets alight. He was up the order in practice, but we'll have to see whether he can be that someplace at the end. We wonder whether he's going to maybe play it a little bit safe. As we know, he only needs to finish in 5th or better if Nick Westy wins, but we'll see who gets that extra bonus point for pole position. Maybe someone else in the field can take that bonus point away from the championship contenders. And at this point, Lars Hagman is that person that will take that bonus point. Currently, Lars Hagman, looking down my list, Lars Hagman's in 5th in the championship. And he's not far behind Romain Lebreau. Only a few points behind, so all to play for to stay in the top 5. This has been a very competitive championship with the fact that drivers had to switch around the cars that they use. It's made it very interesting for me watching, and hopefully you at home. So Maxime Perotti has now popped up into 3rd place. Nick Westy is in 2nd, but Lars Hagman still tops the times with just over 5 minutes to go. It looks like perhaps Tony is slowing down for this lap. Perhaps he's feeling like going again. Tyres do get very, very hot. So rounding out the top 5 is Bjorn Hagman, as he drops down to 6th. As I say that, Tony Talviti is now in 5th, but Julian Pors has now dropped up to he's notched up to 4th. So a good starting position would be to stay on the 2nd row. But it is a very interesting turn 1. It's quite a deceptive turn 1. The corner seems to tighten as it goes through. You enter it faster than you think you should, and sometimes that ends up with the Armco does get close to the track. So if you were paying attention to the intro video, some of the AI had trouble getting through turn 1 side by side. So maybe our drivers will be the same. These cars are not thin. They are very wide But our drivers have kept it clean so far. So Nick Westy just coming into the pits there. So our drivers do have to do an outlap, the fast laps, and then come into the pits at the end. So this is Julian Paul on a quick lap. Had to negotiate another slower car, unfortunately one of the faster parts of the circuit. So Julian Paul looks like he's running a custom skin for this final round. So Maxime Perotti now up to second. So good change of direction coming through that chicane. Not even troubling the curbs. So it looks like this Lance here is quite nimble. Sliding one way and the other. Lars Hagman taking a little bit of a different approach. Maybe taking a little bit too much curb and running wide on the exit as well. Bumping up to the hill. Over the crest and down towards this corner. But tight into the apex. Not running wide. That's good. Gets the nose in quite early. But these tyres may not survive too much punishment. But they do get the opportunity to change tyres. So it does depend on when they pit. Depending on when they're in traffic or not. So just under 3 minutes to go. It is Hagman in first. Perotti second. Nick Westy third. Pause in fourth with Talviti in fifth. So Talviti is playing it dangerously here. He just needs to get fifth in the championship. But he can't risk an accident at the start. So Julian Paws breaking down to the hairpin. Trying to get that thing to turn. He does have a driver behind him, who I think he passed and has caught up on his qualifying lap. So it doesn't look like he's going to be setting the timesheets alight. He's now dropped down to 5th place. We may have some quick laps coming in at the end. So bumping over the top there. I think we've got a little bit of a laggy car. I think that's Bjorn Hagman in the yellow Capri. So hopefully those connection problems don't rear their head again. So I think Bjorn Hagman has had some problems with connection through the season, which has ruined some good results. So just over 1 minute to go. Tony Talviti now pops to the top of the timesheets. I said he may have been in danger being back on the third row, but 1:27.0. So a marker put down just over 0.3 faster than anybody else. So, what can Lars Hagman do? Anything about it? He's on a little bit of a slow lap this time around, not coming into the pit, so this will be his final lap with 1 minute to go. Philip Pichler looks like he's struggling out on circuit, but he's managed to get going again. Lucky it was the corner where the leader, where provisional pole sitter was coming up to. So Nick Westy, fastest of all in the first sector. A little bit slower in the second. So this will be his maybe penultimate effort. So Nick Westy goes in second, only 0.3, just under 0.3 slower than our provisional pole sitter Tony Talviti. So our two championship leaders on the front row of the grid. Is this going to provide some fireworks at the start of this race? So it looks like Talviti is possibly slowing. I don't think he's going to make it to the line. Indeed he's not. There's only 5 seconds to go. So we have a few drivers still out on track. Nick Westy, looking at that first sector time, it is quick in the first sector, but not by an awful lot. Second sector, screaming those tyres. It did clip the curb on the outside, but it didn't unsettle the car. So coming up to one of the slowest corners of the track. So personal best in the second sector. So it looks like Bjorn Hagman just span coming into that hairpin, so that lap is ruined. So will this take provisional pole away from Tony Talviti in the last dying seconds of this qualifying session? Doesn't run wide on the exit. It comes across the line. Didn't quite make it, just under 0.2. So Tony Talviti stays on provisional pole. Julian Paws stays in 4th. Looks like we have Bjorn Hagman coming to the pits in 8th, and our 11th place runner is John van der Geest, who I believe is the last runner on track. So John van der Geest unfortunately stays in 11th place. So that is the grid. That is the grid. So if we set our starting order and go back, and I'll give you an overview. So, looking at the grid, we have starting on pole for the final round of this series, Tony Talviti, our championship leader. His championship contender in 2nd, Nick Westy, cutting it a bit close. Lars Hagman in 3rd, could be an upset. Julian Paws in 4th. Maxime Perotti stays in 5th. Romain Lebreau in 6th. Philip Pichler in 7th. Bjorn Hagman, hopefully he can hang on with that connection trouble, in 8th. Phil Brown in 9th. And Joe Roebuck in 10th. With John van der Geest rounding out the field in 11th. I believe we are missing one driver who may not have made it back for qualifying, which is a shame. I did see 12 runners in the list, but I'm seeing that the 12th runner hasn't come back towards us. So 45 minutes mandatory pit stop in this race. What will happen? The drivers have got a 5-minute warm-up session, so a reminder that they will not go on the green. It is a formation lap, a manual formation lap, and drivers do have the opportunity to warm their tyres and brakes as they go round, but the pole sitter will take them round, and he will go, and in this case it will be Tony Talviti that will take them round, and he will go when they come out of the final chicane. So, what is going to happen? I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks, and it all comes down to this. It's always good when the championship isn't sewn up by the final round, so you have a championship decider right at the end. But I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Is there going to be drama? We've had some dramatic rounds with a couple of drivers that started off out in the lead and they had pit stop trouble and ended up retiring from the race because of pit stop trouble. And unfortunately they aren't here today. A couple of drivers that were here early on in the series but weren't able to compete today. So, running down the championship order, so if we look at what our championship standings are, so just a reminder, it is Tony Talviti topping the championship, so he is in the box seat. He only needs to come 5th place if Nick Westy takes the win, and the bonus point has gone to Tony Talviti, so that moves it a bit further away from Nick Westy. So if I do my championship calculations like I have on my spreadsheet, so because of that bonus point, Tony Talviti only has to finish 7th. So that's he's got less of a hill to climb when it comes to the championship. So very, very interesting how this is going to play out. So will he play it safe, or will he just go for the win and leave everyone else to try and figure out where they fit in the championship? But Julian Paws could be a danger man. He will be taking points off some of our championship contenders because he's starting far up the grid. And again, could Romain Lebreau and Lars Hagman starting up in the top 6 could be a spoiler. But we will have to see. So it's going to remain a very, very interesting. It's going to keep me on my toes for the remainder of this 45-minute race. I'm going to try not to do maths at the microphone because it's very difficult. But these drivers have been competing in 4 rounds of this championship, all on classic tracks that have been chosen by the admin. So that's what we do here at Sim Racing Online. We like to have classic cars and classic tracks. But in this scenario, we have 70s or 80s sports cars. But coming up at Sim Racing Online, we do have a new series starting, which is 1967 F1 cars. That will be in April, at the end of April. And we also do have a series starting out with the Porsche 992. So that should be fun. Another series that is currently ongoing and is nearing its end. We've been running 1950s Formula 1 cars. Got 2 rounds to go of that championship. It's been running since the start of March. So they've got 2 rounds of the championship. We did one last Thursday. And next Thursday on 2nd of April will be the next round at Rouen. So look forward to that. And we will be broadcasting that on this channel as well. So interesting stuff. So we're coming down to the final seconds of warm-up. So remember, it is a formation lap for these drivers. So the leader will lead them around on a manual formation lap, and he will go just as they exit the final chicane. But our leader can dictate the pace. So our 2 championship contenders will be on the 1st and 2nd positions. So Nick Westy does need to get out front. Let's hope our last round of this championship stays clean. Last thing we want is the championship decided by an accident or coming together. But there are rules in place. We do like a bit of gentlemanly conduct in Sim Racing and Online, so we have a rule that if you do punt someone off from the rear, you have to give that place back or you suffer the wrath of the stewards. So Tony Salviti out front, Nick Westy in 2nd, Lars Hagman in 3rd. So a field of Lanciers with a few Capris thrown in. So is Lancia versus Capri. That's the choice of car we are left with. So Tony Talviti taking them away from the line very, very slowly. Maybe trying to save tyre temperature. So let's hope we can keep it clean. Let's hope no one has any connection issues, because that would really spoil things. But so Zolder, Belgium, 1975 to 1985 version. It is a lot similar to the modern version of this track, although there is it is minus the chicane, plus the last chicane is a little tighter on this version, or actually on the modern version it's a lot tighter. This version it's a lot faster, but the curbs are more lethal than they are nowadays. But that's what they were like back in the earlier 1980s Formula 1 days. The curbs weren't necessarily curbs that you could jump over. They were curbs that you had to that was the edge of the track and you go no further. And on this particular track they are as lethal as they can be. So coming out of the vicious chicane and up over the hill, I think our drivers will possibly be getting a little bit of air coming over that crest under the Shell Bridge. So coming through the final couple of corners, it's a very slow formation lap. And I wonder if this is for good reason. We did see a lot of drivers smoking their tyres early on. So drivers, I think, are taking it extremely slowly, so they make sure that they keep tyre temperature down. So it looks like warming the brakes for Tony Talviti. So this is the penultimate chicane here. You can't really call it a chicane. It's a quick left-right. Nick Westy is right up at the rear boot lid of our championship leader, so taking it slowly towards the final chicane. When is Tony Talviti going to go? In the middle of the chicane or right on the exit? So we'll have to see. So coming through the final chicane for the last time this season. So out of the final corner we go, and Tony Talviti is going to take them to the line. So we cross the stripe. Lars Hagman looks like he was going to challenge for that second place, but didn't quite get the crossover. Nick Westy going to the outside on turn 2. There's no room there. So clean through the first few corners, it looks like. So Lars Hagman chasing in third. So early on, smoking of tyres. I don't know whether that's going to be a detriment to Nick Westy. He probably wants to get out front as soon as possible. So quite clean coming up. Looked like Julian Paws was perhaps fancying a go up into the chicane, but it was a little bit too tight. So down into these very quick right-handers. On board with Nick Westy. So feinting a look to the inside. Tony Talviti locking up. That's not going to do the tyres any good. Perhaps a flat spot would be very uncomfortable this early on in the race. So still clean through the first couple of laps. So it's Talviti in first, Nick Westy second, Lars Hagman in third, Perotti in fourth, and Paws is in fifth. So the top two are starting to gap the rest of the field. Again, lockups from Nick Westy behind. So, and also lockups from Tony Talviti as well, trying to get that thing slowed down into turn 2. Looks like very difficult, especially over the bumps. So through turn 3, Nick Westy feigning to the inside a little. Tony Talviti keep a very consistent line as they go up to the very sharp chicane. It's very fast pace for the first and second up front, which is where we're concentrating. So no bounding over the curbs, over the top of the hill. And I imagine that drivers are probably having to be very, very careful not redlining over the top of that crest as well, because the car will go light and the wheels will come off the ground. So remember, mandatory pit stop for these drivers. So down to the hairpin. Lockups for Tony Talviti once again. So coming to the end of the lap. So it's been very, very clean so far. It looks like De Silva has dropped off the back of the field in 12th. And there is a big gap formed between 7th and 8th, which is Pichler going back to Bjorn Hagman. Tony Talviti, another fastest lap of the race. And I believe just been beaten by Nick Westy, 128.4. So fast pace out front, nearly down to the 27s. Another lock up from Talviti. Those tyres have got to be flat spotted, I'm sure. But Talviti is doing what he needs to do, leading out front. So up to the chicane. So first and second are quite close. Third and fourth are quite close as well. So Nick Westy gets it all out of shape coming out of that chicane and over the hill. So it looks like you don't want to go over that crest with any type of lock on, because it will pull you wide. So gap now up to about a second. So side by side, Perotti, and that's Paws around the outside. Looks like Paws is going to run out of road, unfortunately. There is not a lot of grip out there, and unfortunately that will mean they will drop into the clutches of the Romain Lebreau. So running very similar paint jobs. Look like team paint jobs for Paws and Perotti. And again, the pace is coming down to 1:28.0, so Tony Talviti puts another fastest lap of the race in. So Paws has now got to catch up back to Perotti. So that's Lebreau. And Paws challenging. Look at those bumps. It looks very uncomfortable. I wonder if there's team orders between these two. Or I wonder if they are in contact with each other to see when they are going to pit and when they aren't. Nick Westy has pulled up to the back of Tony Talviti once again. So battle resumed. So looks like Nick Westy has some pace to be able to pull right back onto the rear end of Talviti, who is doing the best. He doesn't need to finish in the lead, but he secures the championship by being there. So slightly wide into the hairpin, but looked like Nick Westy couldn't get the power down to be able to pass on the exit. So slightly yellow flag. That looks like 7th place of Pichler has gone around. That's a very awkward place to be perched. So luckily he didn't beach his car on that curb. So it looks like he span around, and that's dropped him from 7th place all the way down to 11th. So that's unfortunate for Pichler. But Maxime Perotti and Paws, 4th and 5th, are now in a battle again. So Paws is being able to pull out a gap. Lebreau has dropped back from Paws a little way, so I wonder whether Lebreau had a little bit of a problem, because he's now dropped back quite significantly by about 6 seconds or so. So the gap has grown. So 4th and 5th are locked together, but there's a bit of a gap to 6th. And he's dropped back to the battle for 7th and 8th, who are locked together. But Paws fancies a chance to grab another position, perhaps getting up to the podium. But we'll have to see whether pit stops are going to come into play for strategy. So drivers do have to have a mandatory pit stop. It doesn't matter when on the lap counter that they come in, but they have to come in and they have to change tyres. So the battling between the top two has meant that the Lars Hagman in 3rd has been plugging away in the background. He's been on the pace and he's putting some fast lap times in to stay with the top two. So Lars Hagman is a shout for the win here. He's not far out of the picture. So dropping back to this battle between Perotti and Paws. Lancia versus Lancia. So coming through turn 1. Perotti locks up a little. Both hitting the curb and unsettling the car, but trying to get the power down as soon as possible. Perotti does take a lot of that grass on the inside. I wonder if that unsettles the car a little. And coming through this fast right-hander, you don't want to ground out too much on the outside curb. But back with the leaders. Tony Talviti still being shadowed by Nick Westy, coming up over the hill. And down to the fast right-hander. So a lot of these corners on this track are named after famous racing drivers. So coming down to the last tightest corner on the track, the Jochen Rin chicane coming through here. As they head up to the chicane named after Jackie X. So stay away from those curbs. Again, lighten up the tyres. I think that was possibly Nick Westy running wide on the outside, kicking up the dust. Lars Hagman has dropped back a little. But we're still seeing out front, Talviti's doing what he has to do. I'm not seeing too many lockups, but Nick Westy is burning those tyres behind him. Possibly an undercut is in order. So 34 minutes to go in this race, nearly at half distance. So coming up to the chicane, the Klein chicane. And we head over the Sacrament Schelling, and then into the Butt turn and down towards Terlemenbocht. So Tauviti is able to pull out a little bit. Looks like a drift competition back here in second place. Nick Westy putting some rubber down on the track. Back to the battle for 4th and 5th. Julian Pors is still not able to find a way past Maxime Perotti. They look very well matched. But that is the closest battle on track at the moment, 4th and 5th. As we step back to 9th and 10th to prove me wrong, Joe Reebok and John van der Geest. So John van der Geest has gone up a place. That Philip Pichler, his accident that spun him around, has pushed up these guys at the back of the field. So John van der Geest now in 10th, who runs wide, gets it a little bit wrong, chasing Joe Reebok. So a big lock up of the tyres meant he couldn't turn for the chicane, couldn't quite slow it down. But back to the battle for 4th and 5th, still battling on. So we're going to have to keep an eye on these drivers to see which driver is going to blink first, is undercut the strategy or overcut the strategy. We'll have to see. So top 2 are locked together. 3rd, Lars Hagman is dropping back a little from this battle now. Now about just under 2 seconds adrift. And then we have the battle for 4th and 5th just behind. As I say that, 4th and 5th still locked together. So Maxime Perotti is able to fend off Julian Pors. Although he gets a bad exit coming out of there. I don't know if he missed a gear. Looks like he didn't have a good acceleration. He leaves about a car width. That was well judged coming into the final chicane. Julian Pors, maybe he could have been a bit braver, but he was perhaps felt like he was running out of space, and he wouldn't have been able to get over the top of Perotti coming through that final chicane. But slight mistake at the end of the lap for Perotti, which meant that Pors maybe felt like he had an opportunity. So got to think about where perhaps the driver in front is particularly weak. So locking of the tyres coming through some of these faster corners. They are leaning on these outside tyres quite significantly. I don't know if that's a characteristic of the Lancia, that you have to get that rear wheels spinning to get the thing to turn, but it looks like most of these drivers are sideways most of the way round, leaving black marks all the way through these corners. I don't know whether that's going to come into play with tyre wear, but they are very, very close to their pit stop window with just about 30 minutes to go. So we're a third of the way through the race already. Perotti hitting that grass on the scary entry to this set of corners. So through the fast right-hander, he goes a little bit wide. Does this give Pors an opportunity coming up to the hairpin? It does. It does indeed. So Pors has finally got past. Can he slow it down for the hairpin? He can. As Tony Tauviti puts another fastest lap of the race in 1:27.7. So we're getting down towards qualifying times. So Perotti was perhaps holding up Pors for the first portion of this race, but now Pors has got past. He's got a little bit of a gap to try and catch Hagman in that Capri. So will he be able to catch him in the next portion of this race? So he has about three seconds. Have I got that the wrong way round? I may have done, because Perotti is now back past Pors. As we are back with Romain Lebreau trying to stay ahead of Phil Brown. So what happened to Pors? He'd done all the hard work. He was past Maxime Perotti, but now, unseen by us, we're now back to where we were. So I don't know whether it's maybe a slight mistake from Julian Paws has meant that Perotti has come back past, so he's got to do it all again. So I wonder whether Paws is maybe thinking an early pit stop might be a good idea. He's spending a lot of time trailing another car as Perotti lights up the tyres coming out the final turn, slightly slower than he probably would want to be. So the lead has now come up to 1.5 seconds, so Tony Talviti has been able to put a little bit of a gap on Nick Westy. Julian Paws is really struggling to get it slowed down in turn 2 there. I don't know if he nudged the back of Perotti coming into there, but he couldn't quite get his Lancia slowed down. Perotti lighting up the tyres coming through that corner, which is not a quick way to do it. He's unable to get the power down as much as he wants, but he's going defensive into the chicane. Julian Paws fancies going round the outside. That's an amazing move. Outbraking around the outside, coming through the chicane. Absolutely stunning. I didn't think there was actually the space there, but you could see that Perotti was struggling for grip coming out of that corner, heading up to the chicane. And he went defensive because he knew that he was on the back foot. Julian Paws said, well, I'm coming round the outside, and was able to keep it off the curbs enough. But again, that hairpin is proving to be a little bit difficult. And I think that's a lapped car ahead. So who is that in the yellow car? That possibly is Gilles de Silva. In 11th place, I believe it is. So 4th and 5th coming up to Gilles de Silva. So Julian Paws wants to get past as soon as possible. Indeed he does. And both of the drivers get through. So 4th and 5th. Maybe Perotti returning the favour. He couldn't quite get it slowed down after passing that lapped car. And maybe it gave Julian Paws a little bit of a nudge. But can Julian Paws stay ahead this time? So the lead now up to 3.3 seconds. So it looks like maybe a little bit of a mistake from Nick Westy. Perhaps burning his tyres out a little early, meaning that he doesn't have anything to fight with. So Tony Talviti out front, Westy second, Lars Hagman in third, Paws and Perotti locked in battle for 4th and 5th. So looking on the list, that is Joe Reebok that's gone round at the back half of the circuit, but he's managed to get going again. He's now in 10th place. So it looks like John Van der Geest has made it past Joe Reebok. So that's a change for position 9th and 10th. So Julian Paws, can he get away from Maxime Perotti? Or has Perotti perhaps got something for Julian Paws? So it's a little bit different now that Julian Paws is perhaps on the defensive. He's not had to do this. He's been the attacking car so far. Perotti outbraking manoeuvre down into turn 2 as we switch the camera. I think he made it stick. Perotti is back past Paws. So a very opportunistic move coming down into what I think was turn 2, which has got a little bit of a late apex. So Nick Westy has now fallen into the clutches of Lars Hagman in the Capri. So you see that perhaps Nick Westy is possibly suffering a little bit from tyre wear. Maybe a couple of mistakes have crept in. And now Lars Hagman fancies a chance. So you see the particular driving style of the Lancia, or Nick Westy in the Lancia coming through that turn. The tyres are lighting up. But the car behind of Lars Hagman, wheels in line, doesn't seem to have that trouble. He looks like he has a bit more front end. You see, Nick Westy could not get the power down, and Lars Hagman is possibly going to be passed. He didn't fancy a chance going up to the chicane. And is that Nick Westy the first of our pitters? I think it is. Although I can see Joe Reebok is coming into the pits, so perhaps Joe Reebok has some damage from that little spin that I saw on the map earlier. So Nick Westy coming into the pits. Doesn't fancy any more of those tyres, so 24 minutes. Julian Paws is another driver that's coming into the pits, so he's had enough of battling with Maxime Perotti and is coming into the pits. So a flurry of activity down there. Bjorn Hagman again, another driver coming into the pits along with Lebro. So this will switch up the order a little. But we are concentrating on the leader right now. 6 seconds in front, or 6.7 seconds in front. So Lars Hagman, when is Lars Hagman going to pit? So Nick Westy just pit, just in front. So you can straight line it straight into the pits from the chicane. The pit exit can be a little bit difficult because you actually get vaulted out into the path of the racing line. So drivers have got to be very careful. So 5th down to 11th have come to the pits. As our leader comes into the pits. So only looks like our second place car of Lars Hagman, Perotti, Brown. So Westy is out the pits and back up to 5th place. I believe Brown and Perotti have not pitted. So Tony Talviti was in the lead when he came into the pits, so he should take the provisional lead when he comes out of the pits. Julian Paws was one of our drivers that came into the pits. Now he's got to make hay while the sun shines. He's got to put the lap times in. So now Perotti is in the pits. So the undercut from Paws. We've got to keep a close eye on this pit exit between Paws and Perotti. So I'm keeping an eye on the pit lane. It's a long pit stop for these drivers to change tyres. There is no fuel. But John van der Geest has, I believe that's Jules de Silva for company. So Bjorn Hagman and Lebro, 7th and 8th. So Perotti still in the pits. We're waiting for the leaders to come round. So Julian Paws currently in the 6th place. He's just going to be coming over the line in a little moment. So 6th place, he should take back the... It's going to be very, very close. So 2nd and 3rd. Looks like Julian Paws has taken 4th place again. Perotti... What's happened to Perotti? Is that a disconnection? It looked like when they had the crossover coming out of pit exit, it's showing a DNF for Perotti. That is very strange. I don't know whether that's coincidence or not, but that's unfortunate for Perotti because he was well up the order. So our provisional leader is currently in the pits at the moment. So Lars Hagman, our leader. It does look like Tony Talviti has possibly lost the lead in this shuffle, which is very, very strange. But we'll let the timing tower settle. But as it stands, Tony Talviti doesn't really need to push. He only needs 7th or 8th place. He is just behind Nick Westy for the lead, but he can sit behind Nick Westy and still take the championship. He has enough points. So Lars Hagman sitting in the pits. The leaders are coming to the end of the lap. So Nick Westy, and here is Tony Talviti coming to the final chicane. So across the stripe, Lars Hagman still in the pits, but he is possibly going to regain 3rd when he comes out, and he's exiting the pits. So Lars Hagman is coming out. I wonder what happened to Perotti. It was perhaps a disconnection because it looks like he may have been able to reconnect. That is unfortunate. We've got another disconnection, or perhaps a retirement. Phil Brown. That's Tony Talviti going into the barriers. He got it all wrong coming out of what looked like turn 2 and 3 and bounced off 2 barriers there. So very dramatic. I wonder if he's got any damage from that accident, but looks like he perhaps lit up the tyres and it bounced him into one barrier and the next. So Let's have a see. So it looks like I'm seeing from chat, it looks like we may have got confirmation that Maxime Perotti did get a disconnection, which is very unfortunate because he was in a chance for a good top 5, but there is still chance. So Bjorn Hagman and it looks like Romain Lebreau are battling for 5th and 6th. So unfortunate that we have had one retirement so far. I hope that Perotti can get back in the race. So Nick Westy now out front by 3.6 seconds after that little accident by Tony Talviti that you saw on screen, bouncing from one side of the track to the other. I'm guessing it probably not a lot of damage because he did hit the barriers flush. Bjorn Hagman can't quite get it slowed down for that last chicane. But provisionally, it still would be Tony Talviti that would take the championship with just over 18 minutes to go. Julian Pors now is in a very comfortable 3rd. He's probably wondering where Perotti has gone because he did have a battle on his hands. And it just so happened that when Perotti was just about to come out of the pits, that Julian Pors was going to be side by side. So we'll have to find out in the debrief whether this was a particular bug, but it did seem to affect just one driver, which is a shame. So Julian Pors now on the boot lid of Tony Talviti. So Tony Talviti possibly wants to not be hassled by having lap cars in the way either. But Julian Pors fancies the chance at the championship leader. So Tony Talviti would do good to maybe play the longer game here, but we know that Tony Talviti likes to win. But he's pulling to one side and letting Julian Pors through, so he is playing the long game. So Tony Talviti now in 3rd. That will be, if I've done my points correctly, that's 16 points. So it's still enough to take the championship. Julian Pors pushing on. So, does Julian Pors fancy a go at this lead? He's got 4.5 seconds in the last 17 minutes to try and catch Nick Westy. Now, we did see that Nick Westy possibly had tyre trouble towards the end, but that was because he was behind another car for quite a significant amount of time. John Fien van der Gies is now pitting from 8th place. So Tony Talviti coming through the chicane and up over the crest. Car going very light. So our championship leader down in 3rd. Lars Hagman not far behind, only by 1.5 seconds. So I think we did see that Tony Talviti did let Julian Pors by. So maybe Talviti has done the maths, as have I, and was able to work out that he could still take the championship if he's in 4th place. So Lars Hagman fancies getting up to the top 3. Being on the podium would be a good way to round out this championship. A couple of drivers have dropped one round here around this series, 5 rounds. You do drop quite a significant amount of points if you drop one round, so it can be a little bit costly to catch up. But Tony Talviti has managed to make it work with only being here for 3 of the 4 rounds. You kind of think that if he was here for all 4, then he would be even further ahead. So Hagman dropping a bit further back from Talviti, maybe getting a little bit out of shape. So 2nd, 3rd and 4th are quite close together. Coming down to this final portion of the race. There's always a sting in the tail in these races, that there's always something dramatic happening right at the end when drivers have come to the end of 45 minutes of racing and maybe tyre wear is an issue. This race is a little different where they can change tyres and they only have like maybe a 25-minute stint or so they can possibly ruin their tyres a little bit more in the first stint and have a fresh set for the second. Lars Hagman chasing on, wants a step on that podium. So Julian Paws, Talviti, Lars Hagman. Now I'm looking, that's a lapped car just in front of Paws, and he doesn't want to get held up behind that car too much. Can't quite see who it is on our track map. I believe that might be 7th place. So that might be Pichler that had that earlier spin at the... I mean, I call it a hairpin. It's not really a hairpin, but it is the slowest corner on the track. So he goes a little wide. So Pichler being very generous by going wide at that corner. Lets 2nd, 3rd and 4th through. So 2nd, 3rd and 4th. Talviti needs to get past Pichler as soon as possible. So Pichler looks like he's having real trouble trying to get that car slowed down. Talviti caught him in a really awkward place as well. So it's now Lars Hagman's turn to get far past Pichler. And these cars going over the bumps look very, very uncomfortable. You have to be very careful. You can't really change direction once the car is bouncing around. Otherwise you're heading off to the scenery. But Nick Westy now out front. Julian Paws, 4.2 seconds. That was possibly... That's another lap car, that yellow lap car of... I think that might be Gilles de Silva in the Lancia. So now Lars Hagman is through and still on the back of a possible podium place. So early action in the race between Talviti and Westy. It's now settled down a bit. Westy is out front after the pit stop phase. A slight mistake from Talviti as well. That is Gilles de Silva in the background going nearly completely sideways. But managed to gather it up. So I'm still glad that there's a number of drivers in this race that have been supporting this series most of the way through. These cars seem to have captured a lot of drivers' imagination, and they've stuck it through to the end. It's a shorter championship than we will normally do at Sim Racing Online. We normally do 6 race series. So here's Bjorn Hagman still chasing Lebro for 5th and 6th place. So unfortunately, with Perotti's disconnection, has meant that 5th and 6th are now Lebro and Bjorn Hagman. So Lars Hagman still shadowing the championship leader Talviti in 3rd. So a yellow flag, that is 9th place. That's Joe Reebok, I believe, has gone round at this hairpin, but has managed to get going again, so no harm there, but has meant that 9th and 10th are now really close together. So I don't really want to cut away from this battle between 3rd and 4th, but 9th and 10th are really close. So Joe Reebok, after that little spin, looks like John van der Gies is now back on his tail. So it's been a battle between 9th and 10th. So battles all the way down the field. Doesn't matter if you're 9th and 10th or 4th and 5th, or even 1st and 2nd. There's battles all the way down the field. So 1 second between these guys, and it's always good when the points go down to near the end of the field, which means that the drivers near the back are still scoring points. There's still battles for championship positions as well. So 9th and 10th. So the gets it all wrong. So Joe Reebok gets it all wrong on the entry, which is slow on the exit. And the Lancia of John van der Gies maybe fancies a chance coming down to this fast right-hander. Not quite close enough this time, but it looks like Joe Reebok is really suffering, trying to get that nose in or keep that rear under control as he goes wide. 10 minutes to go. Looks like I thought John van der Gies may have thought about going up the inside, and he does down to the hairpin. Clips the curb on the inside. The undercut from Joe Reebok. That was a good way to read that Joe Reebok looked like he knew that John Van der Geest couldn't slow it down and just stayed wide, and through he went. So that was good. Reading the tea leaves, as it were. So now Tony Talviti and Lars Hagman still doing battle here. So we know that Tony Talviti has the pace to probably stay ahead of Lars Hagman. They were similar pace in the first stint. So Tony Talviti just has to be error-free in this final part. And I'm seeing on the tower that Bjorn Hagman has got past Lebro for 5th and 6th, respectively. But we're still looking at the battle between 3rd and 4th at the moment. I'm sure we may see the battle for 5th and 6th, or even 9th and 10th. Again, Joe Reebok is having real trouble getting into that chicane, but John Van der Geest can't quite find a way through. Joe Reebok seems to place his car in the exact right position coming out of that corner, but he's very weak coming into that chicane. So that's something that John Van der Geest is going to keep a lookout for. Perhaps putting a little more pressure so that he makes maybe a bit more of a mistake. So this was a lap ago when we saw that John Van der Geest went wide, and it's Joe Reebok's turn to go wide at the hairpin. But he's placing his car in the exact right position, not giving John Van der Geest an opportunity to go by. Back to the battle between 3rd and 4th. We're coming down to the last minutes of this race, so only 8 minutes to go. Talviti gets a better exit out of that chicane than Lars Hagman does, even though Lars Hagman seems like he had a straighter line. So Talviti all over the curbs coming out of that corner. That Lancia looks like it's a little bit of a handful. We'll have to find out after the race whether drivers were suffering with handling issues, either because of the tyres or because of the accident. But back to 9th and 10th, they are locked together. As is 3rd and 4th. I want to step back to this battle between Bjorn Hagman and Lebro, because they are locked together as well. So 3 battles on track. And I am noticing that Julian Paws is possibly putting in the fast laps. He's only 1.7 seconds behind the leader. As we see some drifting competition from Joe Reebok. That rear end of that Capri looks like it's very hard to handle. So as he gets on the power, it nearly lets go. So John Van der Geest is just taking a watching breath. So the lead is coming down. It is now within about 2 seconds. So has Julian Paws got something in this last 6 minutes? As Joe Reebok makes the mistake coming out that final chicane, and John Van der Geest is through. So it finally happened, but it didn't happen where I thought it would. It happened at the final corner. But still, Tony Talviti is out front of Lars Hagman. Now, Lars Hagman is deciding to drift his Capri, so I'm wondering whether the front tyres are losing a little bit of grip, along with the rear tyres. It looks like it may be a bit harder to, as Lebro is through again. I wonder if maybe Bjorn Hagman, maybe they had a little bit of a nudge. That didn't look like it was contested. It looked like maybe Bjorn Hagman let Lebro through there. So maybe a gentlemanly wave by to do battle once again. So 5th and 6th, Bjorn Hagman and Romain Lebro battling away for 5th and 6th. So can Bjorn Hagman perhaps pull up to the back of Lebro in these final 5 minutes of the race? The same with Talviti and Lars Hagman. Lars Hagman has been stuck behind Talviti after this pit stop phase. And Joe Reebok and John Van der Geest are really doing battle. They've been swapping positions a couple of times now. Joe Reebok is past John Van der Geest once again. So did John Van der Geest make a mistake once he got in front of Joe Reebok? So we're back to where we were. So just under 5 minutes to go. Nick Westy still leads. Pause is in second. Dropped back by about 4.2 seconds. So I wonder whether maybe deciding to ease off a little in these final 5 minutes of the race and settle for second place. Joe Reebok goes a little bit wide coming out of that fast right-hander. And locking up, but John Van der Geest is unfortunately following his mistake. They're going to be side by side as they come up to the chicane. I don't think that John Van der Geest fancies the chance around the outside like Julian Bors did. Joe Reebok gets it all wrong trying to slow down for the chicane, but is able to come out in front. So amazing battle between these two. I am keeping an eye on third and fourth because I still don't think that is over with. Lars Hagman still within a second of Tony Talviti. Oh, the tyres screech. I didn't think that John Van der Geest was going to get that slowed down, but indeed he did. So we were nearly tucked under the rear wing. I wonder whether Lars Hagman has perhaps left his best till last. So maybe saving his tyres a little so he can attack in the last two. I think there's just under 3 laps to go. So Lars Hagman wants to finish off with a flourish. He wants that podium position. Again, Tony Talviti doesn't need to finish in third, but Lars Hagman and Tony Talviti look like they are locked together for this final part of the race, as is Joe Reebok and John Van der Geest. It looks like the battle may be over between Lebro and Bjorn Hagman. Gap is now up to 3.3 seconds, so slight mistake perhaps from Bjorn Hagman. So there we go. We didn't see it on screen, unfortunately. It looks like Lars Hagman has got by Tony Talviti. Maybe that was a decision by Talviti, just letting him through. He perhaps got a little too close for comfort. And Tony Talviti just wants to get home in one piece. He's got 23 seconds to the fifth place of Lebro, so he can just stroke it home and still win this championship. So locking up towards the hairpin, that is a lapped car of Gilles de Silva. Hopefully he doesn't get in the way in this final chicane and perhaps pulls to one side because he's got 9th and 10th all over. So Gilles de Silva, unfortunately, out of shape in that final chicane. This is going to be Joe Reebok's chance. Well, in fact, John Van der Geest's chance, because Joe Reebok got really bulked behind Gilles de Silva. In fact, this is all 4 positions. So this is 8th, 9th, and 10th. So this is not for a. This is not lapping a car. So John Van der Geest tries to force an issue, but he can't quite get a car-shaped hole there. So 8th, 9th and 10th locked together at this final part of the race. I don't know if there was a mistake from Gilles de Silva, which means he's now back with these two. But this is a good showdown between the last points playing positions. Hopefully it doesn't result in an accident. So Joe Reebok trying to overtake coming up to the chicane, and indeed he does. Unfortunately, John Van der Geest can't follow him through, but a nasty exit for Gilles de Silva. And a little bit of a touch coming through. So Gilles de Silva was out of shape coming into that chicane and out of shape coming out of it. And John Van der Geest just had to hope and pray that he came out unscathed, and he did. So with just over 30 seconds to go, we haven't seen the leaders for a little while. That's because the lead is kind of settled at 4.2 seconds. So 9th and 10th is now 8th and 9th. So that's the closest battle on track at the moment. So Nick Westy, after the pit stops, with now 15 seconds to go, I think this is he's possibly going to cross the line and take the win here. So 5 seconds to go. Depends where the finishing line is. The finishing line is up near the bottom of the screen, and he will cross the line and he will take the win. Julian Pors only 4 seconds behind in the end, but a good comeback from Julian Pors Lars Hagman will get third, and Tony Talviti will get fourth. So a good finish in the end, battling all the way down the field. So it's still not over between Joe Reebok and John Van der Geest. I'm spotting that they are changing positions. Joe Reebok goes around out the chicane. So I wonder if John Van der Geest maybe feels that he caused that, and he's waiting for Joe Reebok. So after all that, Gilles de Silva is going to get 8th, and I think John Van der Geest is perhaps waiting for Reebok to overtake. But we didn't see that on screen. So John Van der Geest. There we go. So Joe Reebok goes and repasses John Van der Geest. That's very gentlemanly driving. So I think coming into one of the ill-fated corners for Joe Reebok as it goes wide. So after all that, Joe Reebok loses that last place to John Van der Geest, and John Van der Geest can go towards the finish. So a little bit of a mix-up in the last portion of this race, but John Van der Geest is going to come to the line. But again, I don't think he's not pleased with that. He's going to let Joe Reebok cross the line before him. So that is our finishing order. So what a finale to this championship. I thought it was going to be a humdinger, and it absolutely was. So, as we finish this series of the Group 5 DRM, I'm out of breath because it was battles all the way down the field after the pit stops thing started to kick off. And it was very action-packed. So, if we go to the session results, so Nick Westy comes away with the win, so that will be 25 points. Julian Bors gets a well-earned second place. Lars Hagman did go up to third in the end, so that will bump him up the order in the championship. Tony Talviti playing it a little bit safe. He led early on. He had a little bit of an accident. It looks like rubbing the barrier on the left and the right, but was able to come out unscathed, but managed to finish in fourth. Lebro and Bjorn Hagman were locked in a battle with 5th and 6th for much of the race. We didn't see much of it because there was action going all the way down the field. So 6th place for Bjorn Hagman. Philip Pichler was a little bit anonymous apart from that accident, which spun him round down to the rear of the field, but managed to get back up to 7th place. And then we have Gilles de Silva got involved in that battle between John Van der Geest and Joe Reebok. And as it stands, Gilles de Silva does come over the line in 8th place. Joe Reebok and John Van der Geest, it was who made the least mistakes, I think. And in fact, I think that John Van der Geest maybe felt that he was the cause of some of those little accidents which spun Joe Reebok around. So Joe Reebok comes home in 9th place, John Van der Geest in 10th. So there should be one more finisher, which unfortunately was our only disconnection. Unfortunately, it was connection issues for Perotti that was up in the top 4, but he will be our 11th place finisher and our last of the finishers. We did have a 12th place of in fact that Perotti is not on the finishing order, which is very, very strange. I expected him to be on the list, but we'll have to go by what I see on the standings. So 11th place will be Phil Brown, who was a DNF that we didn't see on screen. So the bonus point went to Talviti, which meant that the lead of the championship went even further adrift from Nick Westy. So it was even harder. He did what he had to do. He won this race, so he got nearly maximum points, but it wasn't enough. And I'm going to generate the championship points here so we can see where things stand. So So if I export my points and then we can load them up and we'll see where things finished up. So, season standings. If I've done this correctly, we should see that Tony Talviti takes the championship. He only scored 13 points this round, but that was enough to take the championship plus the pole position. So 86 points to 81. Nick Westy comes in second. Julian paused in third in the end. Romain Bro, a good championship for him, up to fourth. Lars Hagman scoring some good points in the last round. Not far away from fourth place, but ends up fifth place. John van der Geest, I'm not sure that he could have got many points or changed position, so he remains in sixth place. Bjorn Hagman was only able to turn up for 4 rounds of the 5, so I wonder what would happen if he was able to vault John van der Geest, who is level on points with and 1 point behind. So Philip Pichler will be kicking himself. So back in 8th place, he's 41 points, only 1 point behind 7th place. And then we have Phil Brown in 9th, and last on the list is Maxime Perotti in 10th, who I believe possibly got some points for that race, but he didn't appear on the sheet. So that was the last round of the Group 5 DRM Championship. I've been your host, Neil Wood, and it's been a pleasure to take you through what is a very competitive championship. But we'll be back here for another championship, which will be the 1967 F1 Championship, which starts in April. We've also got the Le Mans Ultimate P2 and GT3 Championship to do, and we've also got another championship which I will be broadcasting, which is the Formula 1 1950s Championship. So some good racing here at Sim Racing Online. Make sure you go to simracingonline.co.uk and you can join us on the track. So I've been your host, Neil Wood. I've been behind the cameras. So thanks for watching this series, and we'll see you next time.